Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I'm just winging it, and I've got no rhythm. So today I'm recording, it's Friday morning, so technically it's supposed to be a Friday Reads, but with the upload speeds I get, this probably won't go up until Saturday morning, and I leave it running. So I upload it and then I have it automatically published, which is why it sometimes shows up when it's already Shabbat for me, in case anyone was interested in how that happens. So yeah, I guess this will go up sometime in the middle of the night between Friday night and Saturday morning, my time. Okay, so I'm going to do a bunch of things. I'm going to do a quick review of what I've read, and then one of those books is going to lead me to a massive review of the entire author's oeuvre. I also have a tiny book haul, my last book haul for some time, I believe, but it's something I'd already bought before I decided I was going to try and read more things on my Tabloid pile, but some nice books, I'll show you those. Okay, so let's talk about where I was when we last met. Aristophanes, I'd read the Charnians, I had the Clouds and Lysistrata to go, and they're both terrific. This is a great modern translation, even though this is from the 70s. I referenced the translator who also wrote the introduction, Alan H. Summerstein. Maybe that, I felt this was sort of very modern and very accessible. Lysistrata is bawdier and funnier than even I had imagined, and I had an idea of what it was. Really a powerful story for the ages, and I see that it's been made and adapted any number of times, and there was that, as I read from last time, the Spike Lee film, which I checked, it's called Chirac, but what an amazing idea that the way to get men to see sense is to withhold sex, but it's done in a sort of affectionate but serious way. Just really good stuff, and I guess only an idiot would be surprised that something that's lasted this number of millennia should actually have some value and something to say. So yes, I am that idiot discovering a Greek comedy was properly funny and genuinely powerful. I'm kind of not wholly down with the format of Greek comedy. So I get what a Greek chorus is. I don't like the way it the weight that it's given in these plays. I think there are more theatrical ways of doing that. I think in modern times, without a Greek chorus, we do that with other characters. So I like the idea of a Greek chorus, and I especially like the way that I think Aristophanes is playing with it by having the chorus arguing with each other, or chorus representing men and the women. And I don't know enough about it, but I worked out from the intro and Wikipedia that he's messing with the form. But these are quibbles. The power of this as a work of literature absolutely stands up, and I should probably read more classic literature. That was 3 plays by Aristophanes: the Charnians, I hope I'm saying that right, the Clouds, and Lysistrata, which is the reason I bought this and is the real prize here. After that, I went back and did a graphic novel, and this is volume 6 of Saga. And it's been a while. I've got all these little trade paperbacks which contain, say, 5 or 6 issues each of the series, and I sort of paused. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm probably 5 or 6 years behind the publication at this point, because I try and pick them up cheap. So even this is brand new. I didn't pay new. This would have been $14.99, and I would have paid probably 2/3 of that secondhand. And I paused a bit after volume 5 because I felt that we were suffering from middle of the story syndrome. So there's a great opening. If you have any love for Saga, the opening few chapters are just breathtakingly creative, imaginative, fantastic, crossing sci-fi and magic and everything. And Brian K. Vaughan, who is the writer, Fiona Staples is the artist throughout this. Brian K. Vaughan has been very clear about not having this adapted. It would be an obvious choice. I imagine executives have been turning up on his doorstep probably since the first 2 issues were out. And he's been very clear about the whole point of this is it's unfilmable. And he's writing it to be all the things that you couldn't put in a screenplay and you couldn't film because they wouldn't make sense. And some of that is to do with sex between robot aliens or aliens with wings and ghosts and spaceships made out of wood, all sorts of crazy stuff going on. Anyway, so the opening was fantastic and sucked me in, and I was reading them, and then there's a point at which our two protagonists get separated. The whole thing is about, it's a sort of intergalactic Romeo and Juliet story. So from two different worlds, two different species come together. They're supposed to be perpetually at war, and they come together and they have a baby. And the whole thing is about the parents from different sides of the universe and protecting their baby. So great story, very exciting. Some very graphic imagery of sex and birth and dismemberment. But let's say in the middle, at some point in the middle, the baby ages up a little bit and the parents get separated, and it was like, oh, okay, at some point they all have to get back together. It's this middle bit that I wasn't too keen on. So I paused it, and then volume 6, they get back together very quickly. So a thing that could have gone on for several issues, and I used to buy monthly issues, so I know what that drag is like, seemed to me to be resolved very quickly. I'm fully back on board. Now, the other thing you should know about Saga is, so it's written individual issues sold monthly, and then these are collections of 5-6 issues. I think, what's this? This is, I can't remember which issues this is. I think it's 6 issues in each one. Chapter 31 and volume 6, that means 30 and 5. Yeah, 6 issues in each one. At a certain point, around about issue 50 or 51 or 52, they stopped publishing, they stopped writing and publishing, and the comic went on hiatus. And that, I hadn't caught up there. I'm still only on, this is issues 31 to 36. So I hadn't caught up. I was well behind that. But then, are they ever going to finish the story? Anyway, in the last year, they have come back together. So after taking a break of 3 years, which was transparent to me because I'm still a few years behind them, they are now back and writing, and they've carried on. So I think the whole series, they're up to, I guess, about issue 60 in the mid-60s. And Vaughan has said that there's going to be 104 issues altogether. And I'm perfectly happy. I've got volume 7 already. 8, 9, and 10 have been published in the trade paperbacks, but only available full price. So I'm going to wait. I'm not in a rush to read this, but if you have never encountered Saga, go read those first 2 volumes. It's just, if you have fun for any kind of sci-fi, saga, fantasy, joyous, undeniably adult in what you're going to be depicted. These are not comics for your kids, but it's a fantastic story, entertaining, fun, serious, sad, really, really good, worthy of the name of it being a saga. Clever that. Okay, that's that. After that, I read a book which I'm going to talk about in a second, because we're going to go through all those authors. We'll put that to one side. This is what I'm reading right now, the Book of Goose by Yi-Yun Lee. I've never read anything else by Yi-Yun Lee. This is in the tournament of books this year, down in the final, what they call it, final 16. So that's why I'm trying to get through this. I've read 50 pages, like it very much so far, but I will get through that this weekend. A quick book haul, and then we'll talk about the other book that I read, which is all the way over there, and then all that author's works. 1 second. So these are the books that I hold, and the reason why I'm showing this haul is because this was the first time purchasing from Facebook Marketplace. So I buy from eBay, I buy from a range of secondhand stores, and I buy new books. I buy from Amazon and bricks and mortar stores. I did a lot of book when I was in the UK over New Year's and Christmas. I bought a whole bunch of books, and I bought these on Facebook Marketplace in the UK. So I had these sent to my friend, the pilot, who brought them out to me this week. And the difference between buying Facebook Marketplace and buying eBay is there's no safety net. So I saw these books. I wrote to made contact with the guy who was selling. We agreed on a price because he was listing a whole bunch of books. I said, well, I just want these, and what will you do? And tell me how much postage is going to be. And we agreed on a price. And then I sent him the money by PayPal. And he could have at that point closed down his account, disappeared, and I would be out the money. There was no, say, with eBay, there was some redress. You can open a case, and eBay will ding, and they'll look into it, and they'll refund you if this, and the person's account will be docked, and blah blah. But this was just a transaction that wasn't so much money, but it was enough to give me pause, and I expressed that to the guy. I said, look, here's the thing. I'm a trusting person. I'm going to send you the money. send me the books, please. And he did. And they're great, and they came. So this is what I ordered. They're all graphic novels. He had a whole bunch others for offer, which I wasn't interested in. He had some which I would have bought, but had already gone. So first up, I've got, this was, I would never have bought this except he was selling it. This is Zot, the complete collection by Scott McCloud. Scott McCloud, who wrote Understanding Comics and Making Comics, and I think there's a third one as well. They're in the other room. So if you know anything about, if you ever read Understanding Comics, it's a great big, it's not a graphic novel, it is a textbook on how comics are made and what the format of comics is, and it's fabulous. If you have any love for graphic novels, because he talks about all the way we read visually and what they mean, and the way we turn two dots and a line into eyes and a mouth, but then also the comic format where you've got the white space, the gutter between panels, and how in the space between two panels you could jump forward 100 years in time or a millisecond, or you can switch point of view. The link between the way we think cinematically and our cinematic vocabulary of points of view and darkness and lighting, and how that translates into comics. It's a fantastic, non-academic, very friendly, very down-to-earth book about how comics are made and what comics are. It leans heavily on Will Eisner and his idea of graphic storytelling, but just really good fun and very if you're into comic books and graphic novels and accept it as an art form alongside poetry, plays, fiction, non-fiction, another way of telling stories, then Understanding Comics is a key text. And this is what Scott McCloud was doing before he had that huge success with Understanding Comics, which is, Understanding Comics, you'll find it in every single bookshop around the world in the graphic novel section. They'll have The Dark Knight Returns, and they'll have Watchmen, and they may have a copy of Understanding Comics, will probably be the third one there. And this is Zot, which I know nothing about. This was a sort of independent superhero comic that he was writing. This is the complete thing. This sold originally in the US for $24.95, and I tell you, I've got 5 books here, and I paid in total for all 5 of them £30 plus £4 postage, so £6 each for these things, which I thought was a nice deal, because this is a great big chunky, this is over 500 pages of Scott McCloud. I thought I would add that to my Scott McCloud library. Then I picked up this BPRD Omnibus. I've been going through Hellboy and working my way through those collections, and this is the BPRD, which is the Bureau of Paranormal Research and some Bureau Paranormal Research Department. No, I don't know what the D stands for. Anyway, so some of these are written by Mike Mignola. These are characters that show up first of all in Hellboy. So you've got Abe Sapiens and Liz Sherman and Roger. I don't know a lot about these characters. Anyway, this is a great big omnibus edition. So this originally sold for $29.99 US, and I picked this up for £6. Then I picked up the first 3 volumes of this. Some of this I've read in comic book form. Some of these I've owned in comic book form, but the chance to buy these as graphic novels is great. I've got 3 volumes here of Alan Moore's run on Saga of the Swamp Thing. So Alan Moore, I'm trying to. I've been casually collecting Alan Moore's content over the years. We came to Alan Moore through Watchmen, through The Killing Joke, but he's one of his early starts in comic book writing was doing Swamp Thing for DC, which was a forgotten title. It originally started in House of Secrets, is that right? Created by Bernie Wrightson, I believe, and then had his own run. This is pre-Vertigo. So this was a comic which I never paid much interest in at all. But this is now considered a classic run. At some point through this, Alan Moore introduced John Constantine, the Hellblazer. So he makes his first appearance in issue 37, which I've got here. And these are 3 volumes of sort of horror, fantasy, weirdness. He just recreated the idea of the Swamp Thing, not just as a stumbling monster living in the swamps, but as an elemental, a creature of the green. And so he interacts with folk horror and folk elements, and there's I think a whole series, I don't know if I've got it in these 3 volumes, where he goes across America. I think it's called American Gothic, where the Swamp Thing travels across America, and he travels through the green, from one swamp growing in your plant or in your back garden, or an ivy coming down a wall, and he inhabits all that is green. I think that's kind of what's going on. The artwork here, John Tottleben, who I've seen this. The paper here is like almost comic book paper. It's not a high quality thing, but the printing is great. The colours pop on these things. I guess that's the Floronic Man. Anyway, there's look at that majestic Swamp Thing. So 3 volumes of that. So all these 5 books came to, as I say, £34, including postage. So I've got that to look forward to. But that, I'm saying now on camera to you all, will be the last haul that I do until I've made a considerable dent in my TBR. Now, the other book that I finished this weekend was this. James Ellroy's Widespread Panic, which came out a couple of years ago, and I will review that in a second, but I want to take you through everything by James Ellroy that I've read, which I think is everything that he has published. I think there's one book of photos, LAPD 53, where he teams up, where it's a bunch of crime scene pictures from 1953 in LA, and he writes some commentary on that. But I think I have all his fiction and non-fiction apart from that book here. Do I consider myself a major Ellroy fan? I guess based on the fact that I've bought and read everything that he's written, probably yes. I think it was the first book that I read by him which converted me. I think I might not have gone completely nuts and bought everything had the second and the third books of his that I read not knocked me for 6 as well, and then that was the point at which I thought I'd go back. But I'll tell you the story of each of them. He's not for everyone, Ellroy, because he's the characters that he writes are often right-wing, racist, misogynist, bullies, violent people, but maybe sometimes men of honor, and that's a trope that I don't think is for everyone. I don't think you have to forgive racism and violence because there is a code. But so I put that as a warning. But I think there is so much fun to be had here. They romp. They are intelligent. They interact with history and suggest things that you might not have considered, or teach you things that you didn't know. That some of it is fanciful and Ellroy has made up, and some of it is, oh wow, is that true? And I'll talk about some of those things. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about the first James Ellroy book I ever read. This was not the first book, so he'd been writing probably for 10, 15 years by the time I got to this. This got a big release. This is before I came to Israel, so in the UK I bought this in November 95, moved to Israel in January 96. This is one of the last books I bought and read in London before we emigrated. And that is American Tabloid by James Ellroy. And this is the paperback version. It's according to the Sunday Times bestseller. So I think this must have, I probably saw a review of this in Time Out magazine, which we used to buy fairly regularly, and used to have really good, now it's a free magazine, a free listing magazine in London now, but it used to be a weekly publication that was thick, and as well as all the listings for every theatre and concert and then ads for future concerts and things, it also had a really solid review section: film, theatre, television, dance, and books. So I got a lot of great hints and suggestions from that from Time Out back in the 90s. That was formative for me in my early choosing what to read. So this was being talked about. He had a bunch of books published. Yeah, there was a movie made of one of his early books, which some people don't even realize is related to him. We'll talk about that in a second. But this was being touted as and this also comes after the LA Quartet, which we'll talk about in a second. So I guess on the back of that, this was a big push to get Ellroy's name out there, because the LA Quartet was critically acclaimed, at least parts of it, this is long before the movie LA Confidential is made. And American Tabloid was potentially the first in a new series of books. But no one knows what's going to come after this, and eventually he did. This did become the first in a trilogy, I think now known as the Underworld USA trilogy. But I read this as a standalone, and it blew my tiny mind. absolutely breathtaking. It's what, 500-600 pages, almost 600 pages. There's 3 characters that we follow here. This is in the late 50s, early 60s, which is clearly an important time for Ellroy. And the last book that I just read, White Stone Panic, is at the beginning of the 50s, but and leading up to the assassination of Kennedy. And when I say leading up to, I'm not talking just about the chronology. The events in this book lead directly to the assassination of Kennedy, and Ellroy makes a very plausible case about why and who and what that assassination meant for America. Because Ellroy's genius is mixing real characters and his fictional characters. So the characters interact with real people at the time, and in this case, in these times, at the beginning of the story, it's Senator Jack Kennedy, who also shows up here, and Senator Jack Kennedy is constantly ridiculed for being a man whore and a 2-minute man whore as well. I think he's often referred to as. But in between, we see Kennedy's rise, but it's everything going on around him. So J. Edgar Hoover's in here. We also get this bizarre triangle between Frank Sinatra, Sam Giancana, who was head of the mafia, and Kennedy, who are all sleeping with the same woman. And this is a true story. Judith Campbell, I believe her name was, who was a mistress of the head of the Italian mob and the President of the United States, and all facilitated by Sinatra. I mean, it's so tabloid crazy that you can't believe it's true, and yet some of it is. And the fact that some of it is makes the rest of it plausible. If you only ever read one James Ellroy book, I believe it should be American Tabloid. It is absolutely something that kicked off my obsession, is probably too strong a word, but my desire to read everything by him. Absolutely outstanding. Okay, so I read that, came to live in Israel, and where my book buying, this is pre-internet, book buying was sort of catch as catch can, you know. There were secondhand bookshops in Israel, English language secondhand bookshops, and I would buy stuff there if I saw it. You couldn't order something. I couldn't walk into like a Waterstones or a Barnes & Noble and choose everything. It was only what I could buy secondhand. And having read that, I remember, I'm trying to remember which one of these came first. 1 second. 396, 296. Okay, excellent, good. So I walked into a secondhand bookshop here in Israel, in a coastal town just north of where I am, where my in-laws now live, and I bought The Black Dahlia. And I have this Mysterious Press edition, and I've been to the Mysterious Bookshop, where Mysterious Press was run and founded by Otto Penzler, who was one of the first champions of James Ellroy. So I love this old edition, and I read this, and this is the first part of the LA Quartet. The LA Quartet precedes American Tabloid, and The Black Dahlia, which has been filmed with Josh Hartnett, and tells a story of a really horrific, violent murder, and the 2 policemen who tried to solve it. And this is the first part of the LA Quartet, which is a real focus on LAPD in the 50s and early 60s. Oh, sorry, this starts in January 47. That's when the murder of the Black Dahlia takes place, which of course is based on a real case which went unsolved, with which Ellroy was obsessed and remains obsessed. And the reason for his obsession with this unsolved murder is because, and again, unbelievable but true story, of the unsolved murder of Ellroy's own mother, and the way he conflates his psychic obsession and with real life stories of not with fictional stories of detectives who become obsessed with solving murder and form a sort of romantic attachment to the deceased while desperately trying to avenge him. This was a young boy. He was, I think, 10 or 12 years old when his mother was murdered, and the killer was never found. First part of the LA Quartet. So let's go through I'm going to jump around, but we'll do the rest of the LA Quartet here just so you get the idea. So you got the Black Dahlia, and then I picked up these. So that was, I bought that in Israel, but I got these now in the UK, picked up in these Arrow editions. Arrow was who published my copy of American Tabloid, so they were republishing the LA Quartet. So while I've got this wonderful serious press version of Black Dahlia, then I've got The Big Nowhere, LA Confidential, of course, made into an Oscar-winning movie, and White Jazz. And this is where you get to see Ellroy's staccato, almost jazz style. White Jazz is named White Jazz because the writing and the dialogue is so bebop crazy, and incomplete sentences and jumping back and forth, and using slang, and it's this is probably the hardest of all to read. LA Confidential, as I say, it's made into a great movie. It's kind of condensing some of the story from all over, apart from the Black Dahlia. So certainly condensing The Big Nowhere, LA Confidential, and White Jazz to tell the story of corrupt and non-corrupt LA cops. Great stuff. Movie by, what's his name, Curtis. He died. I can't remember the name of the director. Kim Basinger won Best Supporting Actress. Did they win Best Screenplay for LA Confidential? I don't remember, but if you've seen the movie, it's outstanding. Okay, so that's the quartet. I don't know. I believe that's the right order, but I could be wrong. Someone else will tell me if I'm wrong. That's the LA Quartet. But after I read the Black Dahlia, I found one more book in Israel a month later, and that was Hollywood Nocturnes, which has been published also under the title Dick Contino's Blues, which is a collection of short stories, and some of the characters show up in other places. He has an obsession also with the gangsters of the 40s. So Mickey Cohen, who was a Jewish gangster, a real life character, sort of post Al Capone, Bugsy Siegel, those kind of that kind of era, and he shows up as a character in one of these stories. And but he, Ellroy likes to focus on the minor characters in that famous and much in that mythical world of gangsters. So here we have Buzz Meeks, who's he's a bagman. He's maybe an ex-cop who got done for corruption and kind of works with the criminals, but maybe has a code of honor. And those are the kind of characters that Ellroy focuses on. This is just great short stories, including one, Since I Don't Have You, which is I think again includes this Buzz Meeks and Mickey Cohen and a girl who is being either having an affair or sought after by both Mickey Cohen and Howard Hughes. Again, that cross of fiction and non-fiction, and these bizarre characters. I think Ellroy, for the most part, waits until they're dead, because anyone who read themselves being fictionalized in an Ellroy book would not necessarily be thrilled about the way they are fictionalized. And so, Since I Don't Have You was a short story which was filmed as part of a noir TV series in the maybe 90s called Fallen Angels, an HBO TV series. I don't know if you can find it anymore. I think I've seen track down that first season at least, which is it has. So there was 6 episodes, 30 minutes long. One, I think, is a Philip Marlowe. It was all stories from different noir writers. One of them, I think, was the directorial debut of Tom Hanks. Directs one of the 30-minute segments. Why do I think Tom Cruise did one? I don't know. Anyway, Since I Don't Have You has got James Woods as Mickey Cohen. I can't remember who plays Howard Hughes, but great cast. And playing Buzz Meeks is Gary Busey. Anyway, that's just like, it's a 30-minute episode of a show that was on HBO in the 90s. Who else is interested in this? Maybe Criminoli, maybe Michael Vaughan, Duncan. I don't know if any of you are interested in the levels of esoterica that I'm delving into now. But that was a short story. So American Tabloid, Black Dahlia, and Hollywood Nocturnes, also published as Dick Contino's Blues, same book, short stories, just named differently. That was what cemented me, and that's when I started going back and going through Ellroy's back catalogue. I decided I was going to read everything. So I picked up the rest of the LA Quartet and went back to his early stuff. Let's look at his earliest novels. I think this was his first novel, Brown's Requiem, which again, this was published by Aris. This is a UK edition that I picked up secondhand, £2.50 in my local bookstore in Edgware where I was growing up. This is January 97. So a year after I moved to Israel. Why was I back in London in January 97? I don't know, maybe my brother got married. Is that why I'm in London? I don't remember. I have to ask him, my brother when he got married. He sounds about right. Anyway, so that's Brown's Requiem, first novel. This is one of Ellroy's jobs growing up was he was a golf caddy. And he romanticized this notion of the life of the golf caddy. We sit around waiting for someone to give you a few holes, and you go and you're sort of you've got advice, and maybe you're selling drugs, and maybe it's a sort of bridge between the underworld and the working stiff world, and there's a lot of alcoholism, and also the other thing that Ellroy does, again, he's making very unsavory, is he was a peeper. He spent his childhood, and a lot of his characters mimic this, breaking into people's houses, stealing underwear or looking through windows. Kind of unsavory character for a man who's now in his I guess late 70s and still writing about this kind of thing. Brown's Requiem, other early books, standalone, clandestine. Again, I've got this lovely mystery, Avon mystery edition. I don't know where I bought this. 1 second, let's see. Also, this will be secondhand, £1.50. It's got in pencils. That would have been in my secondhand bookshop. And then a couple of these. This, I think, Killer on the Road is also a standalone, and I bought this in. I don't know if you can see the sticker there. Murder One. That was a bookshop that used to exist on the Charing Cross Road that only sold crime and mystery murder books. Now sadly gone. Maxim Jakubowski, I think it was the proprietor, and he still does reviews and writes. I believe he's still with us. You may see his name show up in reviewing crime books and for the big newspapers in the UK, but he ran this store and would often sit at the back and chat to anyone who was brave enough to interrupt what he was doing, and so I picked that up there, and then I've got, this is a trilogy which are looking the worst for wear, but all in these, so that's Mysterious Press, Suicide Hill. These are a trilogy of books featuring a detective called Lloyd Hopkins, and one of them was made into a film called Cop, a sort of film in the early 80s, with James Woods. Again, James Woods, who played Mickey Cohen in the HBO adaptation of Since I Don't Have You. He played Lloyd Hopkins in the one movie that was made of this, and a very sort of nuts and bolts, but undeniably dark cop chasing a bad guy and breaking all the rules, and you're going to get suspended. Yeah, you can have my badge, but still going out after the bad guy. That kind of stuff, but good. Worth looking at. It's the kind of thing I would have borrowed on video at some point from somewhere. So these are really water damaged. I think they've just sort of died. The materials made that Avon used. So that one's also from Murder One. Where are these from? That's from Books, etc. £5, and I paid full price because these you could barely find these in the UK. I don't know where I got Blood on the Moon. I think I ordered this. I think it's a very early internet order. Either from Amazon or from somewhere else. I saw someone selling this, and I put an order for those. Okay, so that's the Lloyd Hopkins trilogy, and another standalone, and we've done his standalones. Let's look at some other work of his. A couple of sort of more autobiographical stuff. So My Dark Places is Ellroy trying to solve the murder of his mother, who was found dead in 1958 when he was 10 years old. And this is a real story where he teamed up with an LA detective, went through the case files that were generated in the original murder inquiry, and sees if he can, looks at, it re-examines the suspects, looks at the evidence, and tries to come to some kind of conclusion. I mean, has there ever been a more Oedipal, deeply fraught psychological investigation than a successful crime writer hiring a private detective to solve his mother's murder? It's really, this is everything you ever need to know about Ellroy is here. They're starting now. I think this year there's going to be a new biography about Ellroy, who's still alive and still writing, but this is, in his own words, I think the closest we'll get to an autobiography. Really fantastic, My Dark Places. And then we also have Helical Curse, his mother. That was his mother's maiden name. This is also autobiographical and deeply dark. What does he say? I just read this blurb. The year was 1958. Jean Helical had divorced her fast-buck hustler husband and resurrected her maiden name. Her son, James Ellroy, the author, was 10 years old. He hated and lusted for his mother and summoned her dead. She was murdered 3 months later. This is what drives Ellroy. That his mother left. His father was a bum. His mother was a young, vital woman out there finding new boyfriends. And 10-year-old James, who worships her and hates her, wishes that she were dead. And 3 months later, she is murdered. If that doesn't equate to 60 years of noir crime writing, then nothing else can. It's an actual Batman origin story for a real-life novelist. So that's The Helical Curse, My Pursuit of Women. Very few authors have done this level of self-examination. Really stunning. Couple of works of are these non-fiction? I don't remember what's going on here. So Crime Wave is reportage and fiction. Again, I think so. So again, he usually talks about his mum. There's stuff on body dumps, and then there are the usual fictional crossovers with real life people. So he's a big fan of, or he writes a lot about Lana Turner, who was a famous film star who was in a relationship with Johnny Stompagnato, who was a mafioso. I don't know if he was a hitman, but he was a hard man, and that shows up. He talks. I'll deal with Widespread Panic in a second. Destination Morgue, I think, was also short stories. Let's look at this. He's obsessed with sort of Hollywood tabloid press and the way they write about things and the way they described people. If you used drugs, you were hopped up heroin hero, and if you were homosexual, there was a standard list of phrases that you were called, and derogatory phrases for people of color. It's all this was the lingua franca of the Hollywood tabloid press, and he's kind of obsessed with that, and that runs all the way through the reporters who live close to both crime and the glamour of Hollywood. That Destination Morgue. So then let's finish up. So we start. American Tabloid was the first one I read. He did then go on to complete that first Underworld trilogy. So the follow-up to American Tabloid is the Cole 6000, which I think was maybe the first time I was kind of disappointed because I've been looking so forward to this, and some of the characters from American Tabloid continue their story here. Some don't because of what happened to them in American Tabloid. And this was the middle part of the trilogy that I'd waited so long for. Kind of let me down. And then they finished with Bloods Are Over is the third part. So I read American Tabloid in 95, end of 95. This is from April 2001, and then the trilogy I've got, this is a paperback from September 2010. I wasn't in a position to be buying hardbacks at the time. Okay, then we thought that we had the best of Ellroy. So you've got the original LA Quartet, you've got that Lloyd Hopkins trilogy, you've got the Underworld trilogy, which fizzled after the magnificent joy of American Tabloid. The second and third volumes didn't feel as complete and as amazing as the LA Quartet, for example. But then there was an announcement that he was going to write another series, and so far we've had 2 books. And there's talk about this being so it's a sequel to the Underworld USA trilogy, but we're going to get 4 books. The first of which was Perfidious, which came out in 2014, and now I am buying Ellroy in hardback, or at least this series. I've got Perfidious, and then in 2019 we got This Storm, which is also another great big book, and just we're right back into all the things we've seen from Ellroy before. His obsession with history and reality and fiction and the Kennedys and Hollywood is all in here. And this is a man in his late 70s. We hope we're going to get 2 more books to complete this. But while we were waiting for that, we got Widespread Panic, which head down here. So this came out a couple of years ago, and I just, I because I'm invested in that new quartet. I didn't buy this when it first came out, and picked it up at the end of last year because it's always in paperback and I get it cheap, and read it last weekend and had a blast with it. Just unexpectedly fun, right back in the grimy early 50s in Hollywood, and the characters that are maligned here more than any others are James Dean. In the run-up to his early demise, he is so this the hero of this book is an ex-cop called Freddie Otash, who's now a private eye who runs shakedowns. So he'll find women for Hollywood stars, then burst in, photograph them, blackmail them. It's shakedown deals, and not just Hollywood stars, but also normal people. Any man cheating, they set them up with a femme fatale, and they photograph them, and it's all blackmail and extortion and all that kind of thing. With the Hollywood stars, often it's getting them out of trouble. So Rock Hudson is one of the stars who repeatedly shows up here. Rock Hudson, who you may know from a series of movies he made with Doris Day, and this wonderful idyllic romance that they shared. Rock Hudson was a gay man in the 1950s, a Hollywood star, a macho man Hollywood star, who the studio was very invested in the world not finding out he was gay, when it was still often a criminal offence, and certainly something the police would beat the shit out of you for. And so Freddie is often being called out to hush up and hide some indiscretion that Rock Hudson has got involved in. And one of the subplots here is finding a woman for Rock Hudson to marry, so they can make the rumours go away, and that she'll be part of it, and she'll get to be glamour adjacent all this time, and then they're going to have some big divorce a couple of years, and that's one of the things. And he's constantly setting up, finding women to be this role for Rock Hudson, who shows up gamely and says, "Okay, who have you got for me now?" And then really, I can't believe what happened, but I ended up without any clothes in some hustler's caravan in the hills. Can you come and get me? That kind of thing. And James Dean, equally, I don't even want to repeat some of the scandals that Ellroy assigns to James Dean. Doesn't make him out to be a very nice person. The entire set of Rebel Without a Cause, run by Nicholas Ray with Natalie Wood, Salmoneo, they are all absolutely shit on from enormous height by James Ellroy, who paints them as sex-crazed, drug-addled delinquents, a lot of them, with Nicholas Ray as the is that the name of the director of Robert That as the ringmaster of all these things, and James Dean sucked into all of these. That wasn't a very good choice of verb, but an appropriate one. Into all the shenanigans, endless shenanigans, but super fun. Widespread Panic. That's 40 minutes of me telling you everything I'm doing, talking about James or Ellroy endlessly in ways that only I think maybe 3 or 4 people would actually be interested in. But I love him. That is everything I've read by James Ellroy. I hope you're keeping well. God knows how long it's going to take me to upload. Take care. God bless. Bye.